Hey, and blessings, everyone. You are tuned in to Sailor Mindset. We're just going to have a chat tonight about trauma, abuse, and why it's not so easy to leave. It's your girl, Steph Jones, also known as Lilac Calandra. I am a mindfulness life coach and a marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people to understand the true emotions that we go through and helping people to navigate life with mindfulness, with peace and positivity. I am joined by two amazing women who I've never met in person. We've only interacted on social media, but that's the beauty of social media, right? You can still come together and you can still come together with technology, with common goals. So I'm going to introduce them and let them share about themselves, what has them interested in this topic, and then we're going to jump right in. Feel free to share your comments, your opinions in the comment section. And be warned, this topic can be very deep and very serious. If you are feeling a certain way, feel free to log off and watch later or not watch at all, right? It's up to you. But we are going to be talking about some pretty deep topics. So this just is that preface. Just if you're feeling a certain way, we understand you need to log off. We still respect you and we're here with you. So I first want to introduce Kimberlyn Jackson. You know what? I was introduced to Kimberlyn through a mutual friend. We both had left the US, right? And we were able to be connected, and her posts are on point. And just, she was just the right person to speak on this topic. So, Kimberlyn, welcome. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. So, hello, everybody. As Steph said, my name is Kimberland, and I professionally am a school climate and culture specialist. I specialize, in trauma informed practices, restorative practices, social emotional competencies, all of the things that are legal right now in the U.S. As you mentioned, I did leave the U.S. in October of 2021. I currently live in Medellin, Colombia, in South America, with no intention of returning to the U.S., in case you're wondering that. But the reason that I am here tonight is because I am a survivor of domestic violence. I was trapped in an abusive relationship for 13 years, and it took a lot to get out. So I am ready to jump into this conversation and have a lot to offer.
Thank you so much. We are so happy to have you. You can come from that real experience. You know about victim blaming and victim shaming and all that. So happy to have you. Dr. Malika, thank you for being on the West Coast. Okay, we appreciate you so much for being on. I had first seen live with you on it. I don't even know how I was connected, but I followed you immediately, friend requested you immediately, just because of what you were talking about, so trauma informed. And then as I got a chance to see who you were, I'm like, yeah, we're talking about trauma and the inner workings of that. Like, we have to have a specialist on. So thank you so much for joining. Please let the people know who you are.
Thank you, Steph. And of course, I have loved you since we've connected on social media. Just the way your mind works, the way you view life, but also the empathy and the compassion and humanity that you show. I think that was probably the thing that touched me the most, because that's lacking in this day and age, which is sad to say. But just a little about me. I am a native of Inglewood, California. So you see Kobe and you see Nipsey back there. So that's very much a shout out to me being from Southern California. I am a specialist in trauma informed care, specifically traumatology by profession. I am a clinical psychologist. I'm also a professor of psychology. So a lot of these things that we talk about, I often have to teach in the classroom from an academic standpoint. And because I teach African American psychology, trauma is weaved into our very existence. And so that kind of parallels with my other passion, which is social justice, which is very much connected to trauma. And so because we as a people have a trauma background, that was the thing that I wanted to better understand. And then being a PK from the church and seeing so many people that I knew that had unfortunately been violated and abused, I wanted to be academically informed beyond scripture to be able to help people get the healing and the care that they needed. And that's a whole conversation that I will say for once we get into this, why that's necessary. But I am so excited to meet Kimberlyn and for us to get into this conversation.
Thank you so much. And I mean, you guys both said such key things. What I really want to hone on is, especially from that spiritual side, while it's very important to know the scripture, of course, to have the relationship, with God, having the inner workings of, like, what psychology is and the workings of the mind, it's really important. It's like two puzzle pieces that have to go together. If you have one and don't have the other, it's incomplete, and we're only seeing one side. We are so multifaceted as a people. We're mind, body, spirit, right? So if we're only hitting one thing, then we're not talking to the complete person. So thank you both, right, for speaking to that complete person, the whole entire human being, which we have to speak to. We can't emphasize one and neglect the other. That's what we see happening, and that's why we're in this current state that we are in, with celebrities, with main people in the church, in our homes, with family members, all of that, right? It all plays into each other. Okay, so we're jumping right in, right? Everybody, I mean, unless you're living under a rock, you don't know about the Diddy case, right? And we know that that has been going on for the past about like 8 days. Um, and the first main witness was Cassie, right? Cassie has been in the music industry for a while. She did some movies, she did, other things in entertainment. And all of these things are coming out now, that she was physically, emotionally abused, mentally abused, just every way you can think of abuse, she was, you know what I mean? She fit into that category. And the real reason why the three of us came together, for those who are tuning in, thank you so much. We see you in the comments. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please feel free to share this. Um, the real reason we came together is because when we were looking at the comments about Cassie, we noticed that there was a lot of victim blaming and victim shaming. Like, oh, if she stayed this long, she must have liked this behavior, or she got something out of this. She couldn't have all been in the wrong, and she was setting these things up, and all of this stuff going on. Instead of focusing on the atrocities that happened to her, she was being blamed. So that was super concerning. So that's kind of how I want to open this up. What does it look like, and why are people victim blaming and victim shaming someone who's been through such a horrific ordeal? Like, the more she shares, the worse it is. It's like an onion, it just keeps getting peeled and peeled and peeled. Why is we as a society, why do we do that? Or why does it tend to always be about the victim, and we end up pointing the finger at them instead of looking at those who committed the actual crimes?
Kimberly, you want to go?
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking of where I want to start, because that's a
Mm.
really big question about why that is. And I have a few thoughts on that. One that I did share publicly on my own podcast is that many people don't realize that they are in abusive relationships. And society trains us to
Mm.
blame the victim, right?
Mm.
So if a person is trained to blame the victim, they also are in an abusive relationship, or they are abusive themselves to other
Mm.
people, then those are the voices that seem to be most loud right now. And I kind of was just thinking back to myself, like, what do I think caused the people in my life to not necessarily be as supportive as they could have and should have, or as I wanted them to be. And it's so layered, because when you have the realization personally, like, okay, this is wild, like, this not how this supposed to go. I don't think this is it, right? So usually the first thing that you do is you kind of like test the waters, so you reach out to your safest person and you're like, hey, this is going on, or I don't know what to do about this, or what have you. And depending on how they respond, that's going to determine whether you keep talking or whether you just keep it to yourself. And what I can say for myself is, when I tried to reach out to my friends and explain what was happening to me, and I didn't know how to handle it, they made me feel stupid. And I didn't need to feel any dumber than I felt already. I realized that this is not a place that I want to be. And also, I'm stuck and I don't know how to get out. So it causes the person who is experiencing the harm to just go silent. I won't talk about it to anybody else. I'll just try to figure it out myself. But one of the things that I know is that when we are in the midst of trauma, our brain does not allow us to be able to do
Mm-hmm.
things like strategize, and to be able to do
Mm-hmm.
things I create a plan, right? So now we're stuck in survival mode. And because I don't have anybody else that I can rely on to help me navigate this, I'm just trapped. I'm just trapped in the situation, and it takes so much work to be able to get out. So I know that didn't necessarily answer the question of why people address it that way, but I think there is copious amounts of education that needs to be given about what trauma is and how our brains, our nervous systems, our bodies respond to traumatic situations, because it's not as simple as just do this. And by the way, if y'all ever said just do anything to anybody, don't, because it's not helpful. Because if I could have just left, I would have left. If I could have just did whatever, I would have just did that. So it's kind of wild to be like, just do whatever, right? So I'm gonna pause there because I want Dr. Malaika for you to kind of chime in as the specialist on exactly what trauma is. Can you talk to the people, talk to us about what trauma is and how that manifests?
Yeah, so I want to hit Steph's question a little bit with why people go to victim blaming. And I feel like it's such a simple question, but a hard one to really answer. Like, why is this a societal dynamic? One of the things I think about is diffusion of responsibility. So anyone that deals with mental health or psychology understands that that's basically the bystander effect. We feel like the more people that are aware of a situation that's happening, the assumption is that someone knew and someone did something to get them help, right? So we're in real time witnessing and getting the information to something that happened a long time ago, but for us, it's fresh news, right? So a lot of people are like, well, clearly, if someone knew this was happening to her, someone would have gotten her help. Someone would have tried to do something to make sure she was okay. So we don't want to have to deal with the psychological responsibility of we knew someone was being harmed and we didn't do anything to help them. So I feel like that's part of it, right? We don't want to have to be responsible and accountable, because once we know, you would think that if we see another human being hurt, a child, it doesn't matter who it is, another human being hurt, you would think that the initial human response would be, let me do what I can to try to help them be better, right? So that's kind of sort of answering why I think society goes to victim blaming, because it takes the accountability off of them. You, Kimberlyn, already went into where I was thinking about is what trauma does to you developmentally. And one of the things I paid attention to was Kathy's age. She wasn't a child, but number one, her brain wasn't fully formed yet. She was 19 years old. She's still developing. And so trauma actually shifts, like you said, how the nervous system develops. It causes a permanent change to your nervous system. So she goes from being in the natural state of thriving and growing to being in a survival state, which makes healing and things that are natural and normal seem foreign to her because of the experiences she has. It changes how she trusts people. It changes how she emotionally regulates. And so what seems like a little thing to us could be a big thing if it's a trigger to her. And so just the things that I heard very much sounded like a bond from a victim to the abuser. The fact that she went out of her way to express that she liked these things, that this is what she wanted. She went out of her way to initiate these interactions, made me think that her mind was so warped with what love looked like, with what care looked like, because she had been pushed into an environment that totally it just totally put chaos to her nervous system and even her emotional regulation. So that has to be considered, right? It's easy, like you said, to say, well, why didn't they leave? But if you don't know that this is dysfunctional, this is what you know, if this is what relationship looks like to you, and this is not even what and here, this is the psychologist part of me. I don't even know her childhood upbringing. We don't know what foundation was already set for her before she got here. So I question what other stuff happened to her in her formative years when she was a child, that she got to her adult age, and the first thing she looked to was to have relationships with people that were much older than her. Because it wasn't just Diddy, there was another person that was identified that she was in relationship romantically that was much older. there's something else under there that we don't know that I feel like is part of the conversation, not just with her, but with any person who has experienced a trauma. There's something in there that's foundational that we have to understand and heal as well.
And if I could jump in and just on that, because that was me. I didn't realize until I finally got to therapy, and this was like 7 years into it, that my childhood had prepped me to be in an abusive relationship because my mother was narcissistic and abusive, and it
Wow.
seemed so normal. And if it doesn't start off like the atrocities that we're hearing about in court, it doesn't start off that way. It doesn't start off physical. It doesn't start off with these outlandish things. It starts off really, really small. But by that time, I was conditioned to think that I had to earn love, that I had to perform to be able to be safe. I realized that there were certain ways. And then again, if we go ahead on and throw the church manipulation into there, because my abuser was in the church and his parents were my pastors, and they were the first people that I went to get help, and they told me I need to hush and I need to act better. So there are so many dynamics that are in it that we don't necessarily have information about, but these are all things that we have to consider when we're looking at why somebody is still there. There are reasons. It's not that, and it's not that they like it. Nobody likes getting beat up. That's not what we seek love for. That's not what loving relationships are supposed to look like, you know. But in my life, I figured out what love looked like on the Disney Channel because it wasn't at my house. So I was
Yeah.
like, this not what happens over there on TV. I don't think this is how this is supposed to go. But I had already had in those formative years so many experiences that said, okay, you know, use the silent treatment to be able to control this situation. You know, something like that seemed so small was something that was triggering for me and caused me to mute myself. And now I'm not showing up as my full self because I recognize these dynamics. And because I recognize these dynamics, I know in order for me to stay safe, I just need to shrink. I just need to shrink, and I need to try and figure it out.
Can I say this to you, Kimberlyn? Number one, I apologize. I didn't do it, but I feel like I need to apologize for what was done to you. Just as a human to human. I'm glad that you got out. I'm glad that you got the help that you need. And the other thing that's crazy to me is the dynamic of silence is very much familiar in the church. You don't speak things out loud that are not things that fit the image of what the church is going to look like, but it's also a very Black thing. I also feel like that's a trauma response to what we've been through, that you don't speak because the silence is protective, or so we thought. It was a survival skill. So we're told what happens in our house stays in our house. You don't tell people our business, because they also learned through slavery and all the experiences we went through that when you talk too much, that gets you into a situation that's going to be painful. We pass that trauma response down from generation to generation. And the one thing we need to learn is to tell it all, right? Whatever hood you come from or whatever urban city you come from, the hood code is you don't snitch, right? Well, yeah, we need to learn how to start speaking things, because you can't heal things that are not spoken and acknowledged. And these are the conversations we need to have. We need to speak it out loud so that we can heal what has been happening to all these people around us.
It's so true. Greetings and blessings to everyone who's just joined us. We are talking about trauma, abuse, and why it's not so easy to leave. Mainly based on the what's going on with Cassie, but really broadening it open to our everyday lives, church, home, family, and all that. You guys spoke about something that really touched me, because our formative years train us how to teach people how to love us, right? Like, if we are taught to break our boundaries in our formative years as a child, if we're taught
What are
to
boundaries?
allow that
What are
uncle,
those?
right? Hello, what are boundaries? Right, exactly. And what are boundaries in the church? I mean, I'm like, ooh,
Those don't exist.
So if we're
don't exist in the church,
they don't exist. So they teach us to push past the feeling of uncomfortability. Let's say we have an uncle who makes us feel uncomfortable. Oh, you better hug him. Oh, you better kiss him. You got to go around and kiss everybody. I'm all for respect, right? But if you are feeling uncomfortable in your physical body and you don't want to hug and you're made to hug, we are teaching our children, right? Us as a Black community. Yes, it happens in other communities, but really we're talking about one of the most traumatized communities in the entire universe, right? Where we had to go through so many things and we break our boundaries every day. Then we train the younger generations to break their boundaries. So when it comes time to that abuse, we don't know it's abuse. We just think it's our normal life because we've been abused from our childhood. So we don't know. And until you get around a non-abusive situation or someone who comes in and steps in and says, hey, this actually isn't normal, or this is how your family operates. For me, it was when I went to undergrad in Miami, and I was around a good family unit and things like that. And I was like, so what was happening in my family wasn't normal. I was like, like, you just think it's the normal way of life, right? The other thing I
Right.
want to say too is if we can speak on um what happens to the abused, when they're being conditioned and when they're being groomed, right? A lot of people said, where was her family, where was her friends? It's not that she didn't have any, but those first steps of the abuser is to what? Isolate from everybody. You
Absolutely.
cut off the networks, you cut off that. So if we could just check in about that, because I think people are not understanding this entire process. It's a whole system. It's like you have a playbook. First, cut this off, and first make them at odds with the people who could rescue them, and then you do this, and then you make them this. It's a whole playbook. And I think the lack of understanding is what we're seeing. The lack of caring, yes, but the lack of understanding that this isn't just some fly by night system. This is a systemic thing that goes on and on and on, and people are falling into this trap. And the hope and the goal is that people who are listening, that you can identify if maybe you're in maybe you're in an abusive situation, or maybe you are around someone who is, right? You can identify these things by what we're sharing. This is for the greater good of society. This is not just a celebrity thing. This happens in our everyday lives. So what does that grooming or conditioning process look like, for those who are in those abusive situations? And that's the reason that people stay, because they've been conditioned, to remain. What does that look like?
So if it's okay for me to go ahead and jump in, one of the things you said with family and friends and like where are the people, it is really difficult to support someone who is trapped in an abusive relationship. And I just want to name
Mm,
that. One, because looking from the outside in, you could see a whole lot that's happening, and that's where we get that, well, just do this and just do that. It is not simple to leave an abusive relationship, especially when we're talking about cases of financial abuse and,
mm,
not being able to support your own self and you're dependent on somebody else for something. In my case, with the religious manipulation, I was trying so hard to be a good Christian. And I was
mm,
being told, you'll never be first lady material. You'll never, be that. And I wanted to, and I'm a rule follower. And I'm also someone who I just want peace. I just want to, what I need to do to have peace. Okay. Like, just how do I
mhm,
have peace? So in that process, you learn there are certain ways that you show up to have peace. There are certain things that you have to do to be able to have peace. So, how I mentioned earlier, you might share with someone and then they don't know what to do because I can't drag you out of there. I want to fight them. I want to do this or whatever. And then if it's a situation, for example, with myself, I loved and cared about this person.
yeah.
So it's also very difficult to, I remember the first time I had to call the police and no, I don't want you to take them to jail. I just want to get my things so I can leave. Like, I don't want to ruin their life. Now realizing they ruining my life, but I'm compassionate. I'm empathetic. Like, I care about people. This is somebody that I love. So looking on the outside in, I just want to name, it is difficult. It is incredibly difficult. And I think it is important to show yourself a safe person and not expect an immediate result, because
That's good.
it's not going to be an immediate result. It's not going to be them telling you and then the next day they're gone, especially if it's been a relationship that has been happening for a while. And usually by the time that somebody says something, many things have happened before that, before they finally say something, because we try to handle it on our own first. So I wanted to kind of give grace about that part, because I know my friends didn't find out. So I was in this relationship from 2006, and the last time I saw my abuser was in 2019. My friends didn't find out what happened until 2017, when I started blogging and I finally found my voice. They had no idea what was going on. So they couldn't help, because they didn't know. And they didn't know because the first person I tried to tell was basically like, you're dumb. Don't do that. That's stupid. I hate them. I want to do this, da 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 da. So then silence. Let me just protect myself. So I wanted to say that first, and I forgot what else I wanted to say. So go ahead, Dr. I'll remember in a second.
I am like engrossed in this because again, you've had firsthand experience along with the academic knowledge.
Yeah.
So it just hits a little bit different when you can align lived experiences with what a textbook tells us about these concepts. I would say probably too, because you hit on the different ways that we can be abused, and finances are a huge way to control people, right? And when you were talking, one of the things that popped into my mind was R. Kelly and all the victims in connection with him. Those children's parents were around, but the way that they were abused was connected to the money, the opportunity to possibly have their child be a star and get into the music industry, and blindly trusting someone just simply because they had position and power, and turning over your child, not realizing that once he got them in there, it wasn't going to be easy to get them out. So they were fighting for years, some of these parents, to get their children back, and they did not get them back the way they took them to him.
No.
And so finances is more powerful than we give it credit for. So depending on the dynamics of the relationship, like long-term relationship, if they live together, there's a financial component to that. That is stronger than people will give it credit for. Because the thought process is, if at least if I'm here, I have a place to live. At least if I'm here, I don't have to worry about being on the street. But if I leave, those are the other things. So they're trying to weigh out what's the worst position that I could be in. I could be homeless, or at least I could be here and just try to keep myself, keep out of his way or out of her way, and don't do anything to bring attention to myself, not realizing that you're safer actually probably being out on the street, because there's services that can get you to a safe space than you would be with being with your abuser. But again, your nervous system is reset to where it doesn't process in the logical way that it needs to process. The other thing that I will speak to with the church is how often the image of perfection is what we will protect above the people in the pew. And we will protect our leaders, and we will do that at the sacrifice of the sheep. I guess I have a problem for this for a lot of levels. My dad, before he passed away, was a bishop, and so he was high up in our organization. The one thing he did not play about was integrity. So it's one thing to make a mistake, right? So you get pregnant out of wedlock. We know how the church views that. He's not going to condemn you for that. That's a mistake you made. The baby's not the problem. What you did to make the baby, according to the scriptures, right? So he showed human compassion, which a lot of people have problems with that. They were like, well, no, they're supposed to be sat down. There's a culture in the church to traumatize people for making mistakes, and it extends from the biggest to the smallest things. But the thing that they need to be calling people out and embarrassing them for, they're silent about. This person is abusing people. They're abusing them at the church. They're related to the pastor, or it is the pastor. Like, how many stories have come out where we have found out that pastors had a whole history of abusing members of their church, and it finally comes out? The things that you need to be calling out and speaking, you're not. And the only reason I can see that they're doing it is because they want the world to believe that there's a level of perfection that they have that does not exist. We're not perfect. We are flawed. We'll never be. But what we do have is the opportunity to repent and get it right. We have grace. God gives us that. So why not call a thing so we can take the steps to help this person heal? And when you prioritize an image and a mask over the people, that's how we get to these spaces where Kimberlyn deals with what she had to deal with, because again, it's connected to the first family. And the first family, we're being honest, a lot of times is untouchable when it comes to certain things, right? That right there, they wouldn't let that get out. They did everything in their power not to let that get out.
For
Yeah.
sure. And
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of double back on what you said about like having the academic knowledge now, right? So I learned the first time we talked about boundaries earlier, the first time that I heard about boundaries was in 2013. I was 32 years old. I had never
Wow.
heard of this. What are you talking about? But I was finally able to get to a therapist, and she was like, sis, you got a sign over your head that says if something's broken, you'll fix it. And I'm like, I don't turn that off. How we do that? No, right? So I had to learn about that in my 30s. And since then, Boundaries is a book that I keep with me. It's something I talk about all the time as a life coach and with people, with my teachers, with anybody that I come into contact with, because knowledge is power. And one of the things that was incredibly difficult for me in trying to advocate for myself is I did not have the language to be able to communicate what was actually happening. So, me being a very intellectual person who loves to learn, first, let me stop here for a second. First, I had to get over the shame, right?
That's
Because
Yeah.
it.
how is this even happening? Like, what is happening? How did we get here with my brilliant self? How did I wind up in this situation? So that was the first thing, right? Of dealing with the shame and learning how to give myself grace and understanding you had already been conditioned for this. Like I had already had the perfect cocktail to wind up in this situation, but then
Yeah.
becoming so intentional about how do I communicate what's happening to me? What does that language look like? What does that sound like? When I'm talking to people, what are the things that I need to say to be able to resonate with somebody else who might currently be going through this? Because it's, again, brain research is something that I love. When you are in a traumatic situation, you're in survival mode. So your brain is not able to access all of those words and all that
No.
communication for you to be able to clearly say, this is what's happening. So I've talked to other survivors before, and I'm like, yeah, you know, you might have struggles communicating. You might start to stutter. You have brain fog. You can't remember anything. You feel like you're a shell of yourself. I remember realizing I had been depressed for 4 years, and I didn't know what depression was. You know, you just keep going and you just figure it out. But thank God I had students that I was teaching. That's the only reason that I was able to keep going, because I valued their lives and their education. But it takes so much to be able to get yourself to a place to say, this is what's happening to me. But baby, once I found them words, oh, let me tell you, sis ain't shutting up.
Mm.
And that's the
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
too. I want to to not necessarily, I guess, give a heads up to anybody who might be watching this and you're at the place of saying, I'm ready to speak up and tell my story. Understand that some people will not receive it well, but you will help so many people by sharing what you have lived through because of the shame, because there is so much shame that's attached and so many people are suffering in silence. So for myself, I was like, I'm just going to put this on because what else do I have to lose at this point? What else? Huh?
Right.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
y'all
Right.
gonna say something regardless. So say the things, and also I'm gonna be free. So I can tell my story better than anybody else can tell my story now that I have the words to be able to share.
That's
Yeah.
key.
And I'm sorry, we never really know the seeds that we plant. Sometimes we expect a big harvest to be seen right in front of our face as soon as we throw a seed down. But talk to any farmer or any green thumb, you put that seed in the earth, it has to be watered. The sun has to hit just right. The weather conditions have to be right. We never know what our sharing, is going to do. And I wanted to circle back on the financial abuse. That is key and that is profound. And, Dr. Malika, when you were talking, I started thinking of our grandmothers and great grandmothers, and maybe even some of our mothers who had to stay in these marriages because they could not get their own money. They did not have their own money. They could not get their own housing. The education was kept from them. Barely voting just came about a little while ago. So looking at that in that way, it's not just about someone hitting you or saying rude words to you. It is a financial lockdown on your ability to be financially successful. That you have to see someone or talk to someone or approach someone to have finances or to get money. That is super important. And then what's being said about the perfectionism, right? I was like, man, y'all are dropping the seeds, right? The perfectionism, especially in the church, that you want to keep this image. I mean, it is literally the nemesis to healing, to being free, that I have to keep this perfect image, no matter if I'm hurting, no matter if I'm being abused in my home, in my church, at school, wherever. I have to keep this image. That creates a schism in our brains, that I have to be this way here, and then I have to be this way here. And I think we see that right in the case that's open. Kimberlyn, you're explaining that. And then looking, just seeing how we see how other people are operating in our lives, right? If you're in the church, you could see how some people are acting, that they were one way at one point, and then something happened, it was brushed under the rug. They stayed in that house, they stayed in that fellowship, but they are a whole different way, because you end up putting on a mask. If you have to be perfect all the time, you end up putting on a mask. So I just wanted to speak power to what you both were saying in that, where we're looking at the different forms of abuse, and that we're not even putting abuse in a box, that it is all different types, all different forms, and not just the common things, but that it's more than what we think. And I think that when we expand the knowledge, we expand the empathy. So I wanted to just really piggyback on what was shared. Dr. Malika, what were you going to say?
Let me tag on to something you said, Steph, that made me think about the context of this. You talked about how our mothers and our grandmothers stayed in relationships because of the way the systems were set up. They couldn't get bank accounts without, approval of the husband, and a lot of different things that were set up in a patriarchal system to keep them in these relationships. So because of that, we saw women in marriages for 40 and 50 years, and we have started to equate longevity to health. So we say, oh, if I stay in this relationship a long time, that's a healthy relationship. I can give advice on what marriages should be like, not realizing that grandma and papa weren't even sleeping in the same bedroom. They couldn't stand each other.
Hello.
She was probably 2 seconds from poisoning his food if she could figure out how to do it. And all of it was because they should not have been together. It was not a good relationship. It was toxic. But we have said people that are together for a long time equals health and thriving in a relationship. And all of that is because of the financial piece that have put them in the position to have to do that. And so now that we're in a different era where women can get degrees and Black women are the highest educated group, period, in the United States, we don't have to stay with you for that. So now we're staying with you because we're choosing to be in relationship with you. That changes the lens that we look at this relationship from. Because I don't need you. I want to be with you. I enjoy being with you. And that's usually the foundation that will get you to a space that's healthy and thriving in relationship. But that finance thing, that thread is long in how it has destroyed and warped our viewpoint on what a healthy relationship is supposed to look like.
So
Absolutely.
I was trained to be financially abusive. I was trained to be someone who hid money, stole money, never had money no matter what. Like that was the conditioning that I received from my mother. And that's what she did to my dad. Their entire marriage is stole money. It is so when it's so much I want to say, but it's those dynamics, like you said, of I guess I want to hone in on this word healthy versus normal, right?
Yes.
Because normal means something different to every single person in the world. And what is normal is not necessarily healthy. So thinking about healthy dynamics is the work that we have to do, and what many of us have to learn what healthy relationships look like, what healthy love actually looks like, because what is normal is actually extremely toxic.
Yep. I mean, it's normal for us not to have boundaries. because that's what society says. Everybody should have
Exactly.
access to
Exactly.
all your business. The pastor is in your bedroom and telling you what you can and what you cannot do with your spouse, which again, nothing in the Bible gave them permission to do that. Again, that's crossing boundaries because the environment made it to where no one could say no, right? And I think that's the other thing, the power of being able to say no, this does not work for me. That's the voice that's taken away from victims all the time, is not being able to verbalize this does not work for me, or being made to feel some kind of way like something's wrong with them if they say this does not work for me. What do you mean this doesn't work for you? It should. It makes me happy because they want you to prioritize their health and wellness over your own.
Correct.
And the trauma pushes you into a position to where that's the way you immediately think. I want to make sure they're okay. Kimberly mentioned, she was like, I want to get out, but I don't want to ruin his life. That's not an uncommon mentality. We're prioritizing their wellness and their wholeness over our own. We're self-sacrificing because trauma has reprogrammed how we look at how we care for even ourselves.
Yeah. And I think even going back to that conditioning, right? That no, we don't know Cassie's background. Kimberly, you shared yours, right? How the foundation was laid and set for abuse to just be right there, right? Where lack of boundaries, lack of the ability to say no. I'm not saying that we need to tell our children to say no all the time, but they should have the ability to say no at certain points, right? That we are empowering the younger generations to be able to say, I don't feel comfortable with this and not do this. And the other thing, I love that healthy versus normal, where even when we're thinking of the entertainment industry, like it is normal for young ladies to be with older men to be on the come up, right? It's normal, right? No, it's not healthy. And no, they are not asking to be abused in such horrific ways. And that's the thing too. Even if a young lady is saying, okay, I know that I'm about to be with this older man or this whoever, this record exec, this producer, I know that I'm going to be with them and I know the purpose that I'm going to be with them. It does not say, because this is what I've seen people say too, she knew what she was getting herself into. Did she knew that she was going to be in these layers of abuse? Of course not. Even if she had an idea that I might have to do some things that I don't like, she never was okay with this level, that how deep this stuff went, all the layers of abuse. And so that's the thing too. It's like, okay, if someone says, oh, I'm going to, and again, we talked about her age. She was very young, still developing in her mind and things like that, not understanding the full dynamics of what she was getting into, or even if she understood a little bit, doesn't make it okay for her to be so abused. Or she knows the entertainment industry, so that makes the abuse okay. So it's like these type of statements are concerning, where it's like, everyone knows the entertainment industry. Yes, that is normally how it goes. We need to destroy that dynamic. We need to destroy that particular thing, because so many people are abused. It used to just be a lot of women, but men are also very abused too. Even if you go and saying, I want to be on the come up, no one expects to deal with the level of abuse that they go through. And that's when we see the empathy walking out of the door. Well, the entertainment industry, you know what you're getting yourself into. No one says, I'm going to sign up to be this victimized and this abused. And if we're saying that, then we need to check ourselves and we need to say, okay, let me find out more about this case. And I was also going to say too, then I'm going to land this plane. I think even if we're because we're flowing between the church and our personal lives and things like that, I think there's a responsibility for all leaders to have a working understanding of some form of trauma, how to identify, you know what I mean? How to identify. I'm not saying you need to go get your master's in it. If you want to, go, more power to you, blessings to you, but everyone should have a working understanding that you can identify the signs of abuse. There are signs, so like I mentioned, someone's demeanor is going to change and things like that. There are things that can be seen. If we could identify just the main things and then have that mental health piece in our churches, that is key, that we have a department that is literally set aside for mental health so we can know where to direct people. These things need to come into these spaces, and we need to stop the taboo that mental health, is, we don't need to focus on it. If we worry about our teeth, if we worry about our bones, if we go here into every other doctor and specialist, then we need to be worried about the mind too, and really coming into the light of that no one signs up for this abuse, whether they knew what they were going into or not. I wanted to speak to that too.
So can I
Kim,
jump in on this? The because this the brain for me. Um, I need us to understand that our brain controls everything, every
Everything.
facet
Yep.
of our
Yep.
life. And it is what we know the least about. So
Come
that's
on.
where I found my power. That's why I went so deep into brain research, because I want to understand what happened to me. And I also want to be able to understand what might be happening to somebody else so that I can show up with empathy, so I can show up as a safe space. It is so necessary for us to spend time with our brains and
Yes.
understand the inner workings, understand how I view the world. Like, it's so interesting now. And this is a lot. I'm going to say all of this. And also, y'all going to have to come over to my spaces to find out more about this. But I experienced a severe mental health crisis in July of 2023 after coming back to the US to do some work and then just realizing I cannot do this at all anymore, ever again. It's not safe. And the way that I viewed the world has shifted so drastically, because I really used to believe that people viewed the world like I did. Like, people are waking up thinking, how can they help someone, or how can they contribute in a positive manner, and how can they be a light as they're walking into spaces. And in this new life, as I'm processing the way that I actually view the world, I realize that that's not what a lot of people say. And there are many people who are not thinking about how they think. They're not thinking about how they have bias, and how they're steeped in misogyny, and how they're steeped in patriarchy. And people are not consistently interrogating the biases that they carry, because we all have them. We all have them.
Right.
It is not possible to exist without
Without it.
bias.
Mm-hmm.
So it's also incredibly important for us to be thinking about that. Like, where did I get these views from? Why am I having such a strong reaction to this situation that I have or have not been in? Like, what's happening there? That is all brain research, and understanding what's happening in our brains. We cannot afford to neglect our brains. Our mental health is connected to every other type of health that is there. Is where it starts.
Yeah. Can I say this, Kimberlyn? The other thing that I think people don't understand is how powerful cognition is, meaning the way we perceive and evaluate what's happening.
Yes.
And one of the examples I always use with my students when I'm teaching them to understand, you know, sensation and perception and cognition and how that works is we can all experience the same stimulus, but perceive it differently. And that comes from
Yes.
our lived experiences and how we've been conditioned and the things that we see. That is why we can, all three of us, be in a situation and our behavioral response will be different, is because we
Yep.
all
Yep.
had a different cognitive appraisal of what that is.
Correct.
And trauma
Correct.
changes how we appraise situation. It changes it to where we're now appraising it from a stress level that is not the default or the norm of what is typical for most human beings. We're already elevated before we even get
Right.
to it. So then you give us a situation that's stressful, our response is going to be through the roof because we
Yep.
started from a much higher place as a baseline. And
Yep.
so I think, like you said, brain research is important. The reason why CBT works is because cognition, if you change the cognition, you change the faulty thought pattern, the behavior has to follow suit. And so that, I think, is key. That is key.
It is. You know, this is so multi-layered, and it really puts a lot of responsibility on us as a society, right, to do a lot of research that most people just don't want to do, unfortunately, right? We live in a microwave society, and if it's not a 2-minute video, a 30-second video and a quick reading, then we don't really want to do the research on it. But we will judge a 30-second video, and we will judge a little blurb that we read, and we will become the experts. I've never seen so many trauma experts in the comments. I said, whoa, I've never seen so many abuse experts in the comments,
And
you
just
know,
as
who are sharing
ignorant,
all
just
these
don't
things.
know what they're
It's
talking about at
ignorant.
all.
I'm like, what? You know what I mean? And they're even sharing from their lived experiences because you saw your mom going through this and you saw your aunt going through this, and it's been normalized in your own life. So she
Yeah.
must have wanted this, and she must have She must have known what she was doing, and he must have wanted this. If he stayed, he must. So it's just like that, those levels of misunderstanding, and then people just not wanting to understand. Uh, and it's like we have a responsibility, right, to do this research. It's our brain. And I know that when I jumped into psychology, I had to understand why my family was the way it was. Very enmeshed family, everyone kind of in everyone's business. And I was just trying to figure out what was going on. And so the deeper I was able to get, I'm like, oh, this is great. Right. So diving into that kind of brain research, right, it helps us, yes. But it also helps us understand others. That's where the empathy comes in. Not making excuses or enabling, right?
Yeah.
But once you understand what's going through, I'm not going to argue with someone who's bipolar. I'm going to tell you that right now, that if I'm recognizing certain things that are going on, that I'm going to maybe distance myself or approach it from a different way, because I know that you have certain things going on. But it is that lack of understanding of psychology. Okay, I don't understand what's going on in the brain, so it must be their fault. That because I don't understand what's happening, I'm putting all the blame on them. It's our responsibility to figure out what happens, because the more we understand, we can share that empathy and say, okay, I don't have to experience, Kimberlyn, I've never been in an abusive relationship like that. I can have empathy with you. I'm right there with you, girl. You know what I mean? Like I can say, oh man, I feel what you're feeling, because there's that understanding, that background work. That's what we see missing, that people have not done the background work. But you read a short blurb. I hear you read a short blurb and you look at a short video and you are the expert. You are expert supreme, and you have all these judgments, and it's completely wrong. It's completely out of line and out of pocket.
Yeah, I was going to say empathy lives in the upper portion of our brain. And that is not the part of our brain that is functioning when we are traumatized. So, one of the reasons that people struggle, and also empathy is a learned skill. That is not something that we are hardwired with. It is something that we have to learn how to be empathetic. Right. So if you have not had the learning and the studying of how to be empathetic, and again, like I was mentioning earlier, interrogating your biases, thinking about somebody else, why do I feel this way? Right. You haven't had that, or you traumatized your own self. So that's why you can't empathize with nobody, because your brain won't biologically allow you to access the part of the brain where empathy lives. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword, and it's why it's so important for us to take the time to center ourselves and dedicate ourselves to calming our own nervous systems, so that we can show up as better people to other people, but that takes recognizing, okay, all right, maybe I'm viewing this a different way. The willingness to even say, maybe the way that I perceive the world is not the way that everybody else perceives the world. Maybe I'm going to put myself in a position to hear somebody else's thought process on it. Maybe I'm going to watch more than 30 seconds of a video and actually try and take time to understand, instead of making those quick judgments. My personal mantra is curiosity over judgment. I used to be super judgmental. And let me tell, oh, baby, that church had me good and judgmental. Okay. If somebody needs to go to hell, I was sending them, baby. They had gasoline draws on first class.
You going to Sheol, you going to the lake of fire, you gone. You out of here.
All of it. Out of here. Okay. So the work that I had to do to be like, okay, I don't think that's how I should be showing up. Let me actually do some work on myself, so I can show up as a different person and have empathy with myself about myself, and have empathy with other people. That's work. And it is hard work. It really is, especially when you are the only one who is seeking a different way. It's very lonely. So it's important also for us to find those safe spaces and safe community where we are able to show up and say, I want to do better. I don't know how to do better. I realize this, that, or whatever else. And I want to show up differently. But that also takes reflection and metacognition, which I'm going to also say are higher level thinking skills that everybody ain't using.
Well, people probably don't know how to define metacognition, so we ain't gonna even go there.
I know, but you know what I mean.
You mean like Mark Zuckerberg meta, or what do you mean? What meta?
No, not that one. But I will say this too: self-esteem is a very powerful thing that I think we don't give credit for how it can connect to
Yeah.
all the various facets of our life, right? Clearly, we know trauma will injure self-esteem and self-worth, and that will have to be
Sure.
rebuilt after they get out of the situation. But think about how social media falsely builds self-esteem for a lot of people. So the reason why they're
Oof.
judging people is because they get some kind of rush that makes them feel better than by being able to see a person in a situation that's worse than an experience that they're in.
Yes.
That judgment protects a false sense of self-esteem. I should not have to belittle you to feel good about myself. And if we're not doing the
Mm.
work to build true self-worth, then we will get on and see a 30-second clip and start judging people because it makes us feel like we're superior. That's part of the church. That's why we talk
Yes.
about your business is
Mm.
because it makes us feel like we're holier. And instead of
Right.
not saying, I'm judging you, but while I'm judging you, I got all this stuff going on at my house that I don't want nobody to know about, right? And so do the work on yourself. Fall in love with yourself, flaws and
Mm.
all.
Mm.
It's like it's almost taking an emotional mirror and putting it up to yourself and seeing all the cracks, the crevices, the scabs, and all the stuff, and still loving what you see. No different than if you took your body with all the rolls and all the stretch marks and all the stuff we have, that we could still love what we see in a literal mirror, right? When we get to that space, I think compassion is connected to that. Here's the thing that I think people have a hard time understanding. I'm the
Yes.
type of person that I feel like if Diddy did what he's accused of, he deserves to get everything that's coming to him. But I still have compassion on him as a human being because I feel like he didn't get here of his own volition. Something shaped him to become this.
Sure.
I want him to get help. I have empathy and compassion on him as a person, but that doesn't mean that he should not have to actually deal with the consequences of his actions, right? I can feel that in conjunction with feeling sorry for Cassie as a victim, in conjunction with all the other things. Like these things can all coexist. We don't have to say, oh, if I'm for Cassie, I'm gonna hate him and judge him. No, you could want her to be okay, have compassion for her, and also have compassion for the person that's the offender. Think about people who have had horrible crimes happen to their family members and they forgive the offender because they understand
Mm.
that number one, holding on to hate and negative emotional energy is going to eat them up inside. And the other thing is that's a human. I don't know their backstory. I don't know how they got there. It doesn't mean that you excuse it, but it does help you better understand how our life experiences shape us into who we become. And I think that's kind of what both of you guys have hit in different ways, that your family dynamic that you thought was the norm, you realized when you saw something different that it wasn't, and that your family dynamic shaped you to be able to be primed into a situation that could be abusive because you had a foundational thing there. But I guarantee if I ask you, even though people have done you wrong, you still have compassion for them as human beings. That can still exist. We can all do that, but that only comes from a healed space. Healed people can know you did them wrong and still not wish ill will towards you. That's a healed
Mm.
space.
Yes.
And as a world, we need to do the healing because we're not there. We are not there. People
It's
do
a
us
lot of
wrong, and
work.
we want all the evil in the world to come down on that person because they did us wrong. How about shifting it? Doing the work that if you believe in God, you believe in reaping and sowing, if you believe in karma, whatever you believe in, whatever you put out in the world, you're going to get that in return. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to wish ill will on you because what you sow, you're going to have to reap. And I'm going to let it be that. Sometimes I'm praying for grace for people that did me wrong because I know the stuff they
Mercy.
did was coming their way. I want God to have grace and mercy on them because I don't want to see a person destroyed. Not for my expense. I just don't want to be suffering, right? I want to be whole. I want to be at peace, right? I'm like you, I'm a rule follower too. So I just want things to be peaceful. If following these instructions is going to keep peace, I'm going to do that, right? But I don't want to wish ill will on other people because then that's going to come back on me. And then I got to deal with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you
Yeah.
said
And
something
I love.
about. Oh, sorry. You said something about the healing process, and I did want to touch on what that looked like for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually came through developing a personal relationship with God that was outside the constructs of religion and church.
Church.
Um,
Mhm.
Yep.
Gratefully, the therapist that I had was a Christian counselor,
Mhm.
and she challenged me to take a spiritual gifts test. She was like, "I want you to take a spiritual gifts test," and I had done it before, but this time I took it a little bit more seriously, and I got really, really curious about my gifts. And in that process, I learned how much attention to detail that God had put into creating me. The things
Yeah.
that I thought were flaws. So for
Mm.
instance, yes, I'm a real follower, but also I you mentioned earlier social justice and action. Like I have a very, very, very strong sense of justice, and I am willing to go to bat for the things, right? So one of the things I would always say to myself was, girl, why can't you just shut up sometimes? Just
Yeah.
hush. Just be quiet for
Just
once.
sit down somewhere. Be
You
quiet.
Yeah.
like, why you always on the front lines of something, doing
Right.
something, right? Until I
Doing the picket
realized
sign and
all of it, like everybody, you ain't got to be the one at the protest all the time. Sis.
No.
But what I realized is one of my gifts is the gift of prophecy, being a prophet. And my calling is to talk about the things. My calling
To
yes,
is
speak it.
to talk about God's heart and what
yes,
is right and what is not right and how we're supposed to show up better for people. So this thing that I was demonizing in myself and saying, why can't I just shut up? Well, I always got something to say. God was like, no, no, sis, I had did that on purpose. I need you
Yeah.
to do that. I
yeah,
need you to go into those spaces and say those things because you are my spokesperson, you know? So I really took time to get to understand how God had designed me and really again got into, the inner workings of myself, of my brain, of the way that I viewed the
yes,
world and realized this is not a mistake. I also believe that we do sign up for our life. I do believe that God shows us our life, our soul shows God shows our soul our life before we decide to come down here and be like, sign me up for that. And in that, it also gave me a lot of ability to give myself grace and knowing that
yeah,
there was a reason why I had certain experiences and there was something that I was supposed to do with that and that
mhm,
there has to be something good on the other end of it, or else I wouldn't have signed up for it because I know me. And I know that
mm,
I'm the type of person that is willing to, I'm wanting to make an impact with everything that I do. So even reshaping that, because at first it was very much like, why are these things happening to me?
sure,
Why is I'm trying to do what's right, like what's happening, but being able to shape it as God gave me this opportunity to be able to help other people through these experiences because God knew that I would actually honor that and help other people
Mm-hmm.
through these experiences. So
Yeah.
God was there the whole time that I was going through that the entire time. And the relationship that I had with God coming out of this was so much stronger and has been so much stronger, but it's not rooted in any type of
mm,
religious tradition and all of this. It ain't got nothing to do with that. Me and God being here chopping it up
Mm-hmm.
every day, right? Because now I know who God actually is, because the God that was given to me in those environments, that wasn't God. That was
Yeah.
mm,
that was people trying to use God to manipulate me in order to have the type of outcome that they wanted. So I would also
Yeah.
encourage people who are trying to figure out how to get out the self-work is understanding who you are. And the only
Yeah.
way that we can understand who we are is going to the creator and having that intimate time to say, what you doing? What's going on here? And the
mhm,
Bible says, God says, test me. I will show you. Ask me. The Bible is filled with people who asked questions and was like, hey, my boy, this ain't working out. Like, what's going on here? Ask those questions so that God can show up and help to guide you through the process of getting your freedom or even supporting someone that is trying to gain theirs.
I think you bring up a good point is the traditionalism of church, which is a man made stuff that's given to us as a sense of control, which is ironic because the slave masters used the scriptures to control the slaves and took
Exactly.
out all the stuff that talked about freedom and
Sure.
oppression, took all that stuff out to control us. And we turned around with the ability to read, write, and all the other things. We're doing it to one another. We're using
Same
it as
thing.
a way, platform, again, the narcissism, building up something, the work that has not been done in ourselves to make ourselves look bigger and more established and more put together than what we actually are, instead of doing the self work. It would be a whole lot easier to just do the self work and be who you pretend to be, instead of portraying out here on social media to be something, and it's a house of cards. If the wrong person comes out and says something, everybody's going to know that you're pretending to be something. So authentic relationship matters. Religion is probably what most of us had growing up in the church. When we had
Yeah.
an authentic experience with God, it shifted something for us to where we're not bound by the dynamics that people give us. We are now bound by the constructs that He gives us. And it looks totally different than what we're telling each other.
It really does. And it really speaks to the inner work that we have to do, what you both are saying, right? Which is another thing that most people don't want to do. We have to be honest, right? A lot of people don't even spend time with themselves because you don't want to deal with your own thoughts, you don't want to deal with your own memories. You'd rather be in someone else's business, or you'd rather be over helping someone else, right? You'd rather be trying to work out someone else's issues and not working on our own things, or why it's so easy to see the speck in someone else's eye and not the beam in our own. Like all these things, kind of flow into each other. But right, that self-worth is important, and that self-love, because when you love yourself, there are certain situations that you're going to be like, I've had enough of this, and I need to shift from this, right? No matter if your family is saying it, because we've family members have encouraged people to stay in abusive relationships. Friends
All the
have
time.
encouraged all the time. So you have to have that knowledge inside yourself, and it really only comes from having a personal connection with the Most High. Like there's really no other way around that. You know what I mean? Where you are understanding He created you fearfully and wonderfully. He made you a certain way. And right, if we shun the ways that He made us, then we begin to hate ourselves. And so it all flows into each other. And I think it's beautiful that on the ascent we're talking about that healing, that we talked about the trauma, the abuse, why people don't leave. But then we're talking about on the flip side of that, right? Once we start ascending to a different place of understanding in ourselves, because the trauma changes you, it also reveals the next version of yourself once you get through that trauma, right? And trauma is not just something you just get over. You are always
No.
working through it, just like you are healing, right? You're always working through it, and we're always working through it. And once we get on the other side, the other side of that coin, it exposes who we actually needed to be, right? The trauma strips certain things away from us that we might have tried to hold on to, but we actually needed to release. And so we needed to let go of that stuff. And it changes us into who we actually needed to be. And Kimberlyn, I
Yeah.
love that visual of you saying that our soul, it was shown our life, before we even came down. Like I love that visual. I love how that looks, and I love that concept, because it's like we were known that we were going to be able to handle what we were given, and we were able to move
Absolutely.
through it. And I'm looking at the time. We've already been speaking for over an hour, which is wild, right? And I think it's beautiful. I do want to talk about the importance of having that good circle and that good team around us. You know what I mean? If we're looking at when we come out of, I look at trauma as a jail. And if you
Mhm.
have to be rehabilitated from trauma, just like when you come out of prison, right? You go to a halfway house, you have to see your PO. It is the same concept, but we don't necessarily view it or treat it like that. But you have to be rehabilitated. That when you get to prison, you go into prison in 1998, you come out in 2008, baby, you don't even know the world that you're living in. That 10 years, you're slowed down, you're stopped. Same thing with trauma. You stay in trauma for
Yep.
13 years, Kimberlyn, you've lost 13 years, right? And so you have to come out and relearn yourself. And so I wanted us to kind of end on two things, right? What does it look like to have that good circle around us? And even if we're not the person being abused, what does it look like to be that good circle? And then I want to let the people know how they can find you both, and how they can locate you, and how they can get on your platforms. You both have been amazing, and we could spend hours and hours. But I wanted to finish up and kind of land the plane on talking about that, being the good circle and having a good circle, which is like the salve and the balm, because trauma bruises you, it scars you. There's so many open wounds. So we need that team around us to really help us to heal and things like that.
So I'll jump in first, and then I'll pass it over to Kimberlyn. The circle, just if we're being honest, is a West African part of the West African cosmology when it comes to the space that you go to connect, to heal, to dump. All the different things are done in that circle concept. And then if you add the layers of church, when we pray, we connect, we do circles, right? There's a lot of different ways we use circles. So the main reason why is because it shows connectivity. No one's back is to another person. Everybody's facing one another. We're there, we're present, we're engaged. And so who you have in your circle matters, right? Because if you could have the wrong people in your circle, that could be counterproductive to the healing that you're trying to do. So my advice would be, number one, you don't have to have people that necessarily understand your lived experience. You just have to have people that are empathetic and compassionate, meaning they're willing to just show love and compassion and care, even when they don't have language to give back to you that they think could be soothing or helpful for the situation you're going through in your recovery. I would also say to the people in the circle, don't try to be a problem solver, right? Your presence alone is a gift. So be present, just be present. Sometimes just your physical presence, no words need to be spoken, is more powerful than you think. A hug, a touch, right? That is soft, is reassuring, that basically says, I'm here with you, sis, you're not going through this by yourself, right? That is powerful. Allow people that are experts in the recovery process be there to guide your person through that. You just be there to be a presence and to show compassion and love. And eventually you start to learn about things because they're going on their journey and you're present for that journey. So you become more informed. But you don't have to have the solutions. You don't have to solve it. Be present, be consistent, because that's the other piece. Don't show up in the circle if you can't be consistent, because we don't know how long this recovery process is going to be. So
that's good.
I'm gonna stop there because I want to give Kimberlyn some time to chime in. But those are my tips on being in the circle.
So good.
Yeah, I
So
love
good.
that, Dr. Malika. I was gonna add to that. If you are in the circle, I think it's important for you to practice holding your own emotions so that you're able to have space for
That's
someone
great.
else's.
Nice.
Because so if I'm showing up and I'm crying, right? This has happened to me before, and then they're just like, I don't know what to do, like, right? There is a level of comfort that you're able to provide when you are able to hold your own emotions, because that discomfort is coming from, you don't want to cry. You don't know how to do that. So you are trying to police somebody else's expression of how they are feeling. So if you are choosing to be in someone's circle, I think that's very important that you do the personal work of being able to hold your own emotions so that you are able to hold theirs. And I would also like to double down on the consistency. It reminds me of, and I've actually said this before, I've been like, if I had some type of serious medical emergency or something, then people would be more willing to show up because they can conceptualize that, right? Or even when people lose someone, lose a family member and they're experiencing grief, like people show up that first week, maybe two, but after that, gone,
They
right? So
disappear.
now that person is left to try to hold everything together on their own. So if you are choosing to support, to be there, to be in someone's circle, and you know that they are in a difficult situation, it is going to be incredibly important for you to figure out what you can do with consistency, right? So don't overpromise and underdeliver. If you can show up once a month, then guess what? This day is on my calendar. This time is on my calendar. This time is dedicated to you. And the person who is seeking your support knows that they can depend on that. But a lot of times we want to be there, right? So we're like, oh, just I'll be there all the time. And it's not within your capability. You may have the willingness, but your life is not allowing you to show up in that way. So be realistic about how you are able to show up. And then when you decide what that looks like, be consistent with that so that that person knows that you're a safe person, right? In school, we talk about shaky ground is very difficult for people who are experiencing trauma. I need to know that it's Tuesday at 7:30 on the third Thursday and it's time for us to talk. I need to know that you're honoring that and you're protecting that, because then that's going to give me the security to know, okay, all right, they're invested in me. They care about me. They're actually here for me for the long run, not just because it was the right thing to say or do at the time, that they're actually carving out space for me. So then over time, that person will feel more comfortable sharing and knowing that you're a safe space and being able to receive the affirmations. That was what I needed more than anything, is to know who I actually was, not who I was being told that I was, so that's also important. But in order to do that and for that to be received, you have to show that you are someone who is going to be consistently there.
Can I add one more thing
Yeah,
before I
Of
throw it back
course.
to you, Steph?
please.
I will also say, don't go in thinking you know what the person needs if you're going to be in the circle. Ask them what
Nice.
they need from you,
Say it again and
Nice.
say it louder, please.
because we will deliver to folks what we want to have, but that might not be what they need from you.
How we
I
want it.
don't need you to talk a whole bunch of words. I just need you to physically be here next to me. That's comforting to
Or
me,
I need
right?
you to help me figure out what I'm going to eat this week, because that's something that I
Child,
struggle with. So can
yes,
you help me with that? So that's something I don't have to think about. But
I don't
no,
have
you
to
want
judge
to you
you.
want to go out. I don't need that right now.
Right.
Say the
Give the
thing.
people what they want, not what you want them to have. Steph, I'm gonna let you close.
That's beautiful.
I had to add that in there.
No, it's true. It's so true, because healing even has its own love language, that we don't
Yeah,
give people how we would want it. That if you need it a certain way, I need to give it to you that certain way.
girl.
And if I cannot,
Yeah,
then I need to take a step back, because we re-traumatize people. They've
Woo!
already been through trauma. And then we come in and we re-traumatize, thinking that we're being helpful, right? So, whew, this has been awesome and wonderful. And the goal was superseded, right? To give people that education, to help people to have that empathy, and to really dig into what true trauma is, abuse, and why it's not so easy to leave. Oh, you should just leave. Rewatch this and see what's going on, right? We have Kimberlyn, who was actually in an abusive relationship for 13 years. And we have Dr. Malika, who has studied trauma and studied the inner workings of it, right? Where we're trying to give these practical examples of what to do. And then how you, not even so much how you get out of it, that on the flip side, that when you are out of it, you're healing, you're with your circle, you are finding the right circle that fits for you, that you are not even lowering your standards for that, that if someone is not working out, that it's okay to take a step back, because this is your time of healing and you don't want to damage yourself in this time. Trauma makes you very vulnerable. It exposes you, and so does healing. And so they need to be treated in that same way. We thank you so much for joining us, Kimberlyn, Dr. Malika. I can't even say thank you enough. So appreciate your willingness to jump on and share your experiences, share your expertise, and really help the people, right? We are helping people who are not necessarily in the entertainment world. We're talking about the average person who is struggling, who is going through, but you don't have to, right? You can acknowledge what you're going through, and there is a way out. And so we're here to encourage you to be a survivor and to remain a survivor, right? And to not get caught in the same traps. Thank you so much. I do want to end it. Kimberlyn and Dr. Malika, please share where people can find you, where they can connect with you on social media.
So yeah, I'll start off. I have my Instagram handle here at Kimberlyn J, and you can go to
Yes.
kimberlynjackson.com, and there you're able to find all of the links to all of the things that I have going on. I would love for you all to connect with me, my journey. I am an intuitive melanated life coach. So through this process of healing, I wrote a curriculum of how to actually build a personal relationship with God and understand understand your gifts and your callings and to walk in that boldly. So thank you for this opportunity and for me being able to share my lived experiences and what life is like after that, because there is life after. If
Yes.
you and when you,
Yes.
let me say, if when you get out, there is
Yes.
life. And
When.
that is a
Beautiful.
chapter in your story that you are able to
Mm.
use in order to impact the world. So if you are in a place where you're saying to yourself, I don't know if I can do this, reach out to Dr. Malika, reach
Yes.
out to myself, reach out to Steph, reach out to somebody so that you have that safe space.
Absolutely. And
Yes.
real quick, my Instagram handle is here on the screen. Also, if you want to go to my website, it's malikambrown.com. And then again, the links to all the other things that I have going on is there. I also, just as I've lived and I've dealt with people and seen other people's lived experiences, I have started to dig deeper into better understanding the root work that we need to do when it comes to trauma and all the other things that are going on with us. So I'm in the process of putting together a curriculum that's African centered and very much is about the foundations of wellness that was already embedded in us. It's not about us healing, it's about us returning to what was already there for us as a
Woo.
people. And so this has been awe-inspiring, and literally standing in the dungeon in the castle in Ghana is where this impetus happened for me 2 years ago to go this direction. So part of it is understanding that you're not broken, the root is damaged, and that's what you're healing. You're healing the root. And I think that when you come from that perspective, you don't feel like you're a project. You don't feel like you're a mistake. You don't feel like you're damaged goods. You start to understand that, like you said, there is life after this. And I just need to heal this root so that I can get to the version of myself that I'm meant to be.
That's good, Dr. Malika. Thank you for that.
Oh, so good. So good. So good. Again, thank you both. Thank you for all of our guests who tuned in. You were in the comments. We appreciate you so much. We wish you peace and blessings wherever you are on your journey. And we will see you next time. Thank you for tuning in. Peace.